I'm Marquette, and I am the founder and the president of the Caregiver Incentive Project. Myself and my wife, we have a daughter that's 31 years old. Our daughter was born premature and spent her first 8 weeks in a NICU. And she has what's called cerebral palsy. And so my daughter needs care. And when she grew up and when we began to look for someone to help us care for her, because the truth is her mother and I will not be here forever, it was kind of frightening. It was kind of sickening almost. The system that's supposed to be there in home caregivers, I found that system to be so broke and so disheartening that how caregivers were treated and ultimately then how the cared for weren't being cared for very well because there's not enough caregivers. So I did something about that. I talked to a lot of people that have a lot of government programs and state programs and found it wanting that caregivers just are not recognized as a career. So I decided to do something about it. We are a nonprofit organization. A nonprofit means that you don't pay taxes and that you're not in a traditional business to make money. Now you do pay your employees, you do employ people, you do pay benefits and stuff like that, but you're not like the corner convenience store where you sell something, gasoline or soda, or a large automaker where you make and sell trucks and cars. So what do we do? Well, a lot of times a nonprofit fills a niche that isn't being filled by a government agency or a state agency or anything. So the first thing you do is apply to your state to become incorporated. You got to do that. You have to have a business license. So you start the general path of starting any business, and then you apply paperwork to the federal government, to the Internal Revenue Service, to be a nonprofit. And a lot of times you might hear nonprofit or not-for-profit, and then there's different classifications. They come in different forms. We're considered, or we're labeled, I got the permission from the federal government, we're what's called a 501c3 public charity. Our funding comes from donations, and donations come from individuals that we talk to, and we tell them about why we exist, and they want to help. So they'll donate sometimes $20 or they'll donate $100. And then we hold fundraisers, and fundraisers come in the form of things like golf outings or chicken fries. A lot of times a community will get together and have a very, very large barbecue, or a service organization like the Lions or the Rotary. Clubs like that you may have heard of in your community raise funds for others. There's approximately 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States, and they employ about 11.4 million people. A lot of the jobs in a nonprofit are traditional, like you would expect in any kind of a corporation or a business, is an executive director, so business management and financial bookkeepers and accountants and other people, social workers, and a lot of different of the traditional career fields. But then there's also positions that are special event coordinators or donor outreach or grant writing. The federal government, state governments in that award grants, and they award them for several different reasons. They sometimes need a service provided that a government agency maybe don't, or they want to augment what the government agencies do, and so they'll award grant money for that. But to learn some more about grants and grant writing, I'll turn you over to a grant writer.
Hi, I'm Heather Peacock with Get Fresh Communications. Working as a grant writer, I often meet with an organization to discuss their current programs as well as projects they're planning for the future. Then we discuss the funding that they need to cover the expenses for those projects, and we look at applications on a local, state, and national level from different grant funding sources to help fund those projects. Once we identify an application that might be appropriate for a project, we'll look at it in more detail to make sure that the organization and their project meet all of the eligibility requirements for that application. We'll also take a really careful look at making sure that the mission and vision of the nonprofit organization and their project match those of the grantor. Then we begin the work. Sometimes applications can be very simple or they can be very extensive and require a lot of documentation. But it all involves with the grant writer working with the organization to outline the program clearly for the grantor, as well as the expenses that are associated with that project. Often there's a lot of detail and formatting that is required to properly apply for a grant application, and a grant writer will help with that as well. Sometimes organizations will then take the work of the grant writer and submit the application, or the grant writer will work with the organization to submit the application. Grant writing is a wonderful resource for nonprofit organizations to help develop some additional funding sources. And although it can help fund a lot of projects, it's important to also note that it's just one of many different funding sources that organizations should use to help fund their organization and different projects they're planning for the future.
And then other things are like foundations. Foundations are nonprofits, but they're a very unique nonprofit. And the way they go about doing it, again, a lot of the traditional roles, but they provide funding often to us other nonprofits. And with that said, I'll turn you over to someone that runs a foundation.
I'm Jim LaJoy, Executive Director of the Superior Health Foundation in Marquette, Michigan. The Superior Health Foundation is a health-centered grant-giving organization that provides grants to nonprofits all across the Upper Peninsula. We've been in existence since September 1st, 2012, and in our short history, we have awarded more than $3.5 million in health center grants. We have a special affinity with those with disabilities, with health education, children, and elderly. But we're open to projects of all shapes and sizes. We award large grants, we have indigent care grants, pilot project grants, equipment grants, and then we also work very actively to provide funding for proactive grants that address health needs in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Thank you, Jim, for that great information about a foundation. Another organization called the United Way. They're kind of a professional fundraiser to help other organizations. Once again, they feel that need, they see that need, they understand your mission, you become a partner with them, and then they help raise funds on your behalf. With that, I'll turn you over to a director of United Way.
I'm Andrew Rickauer, the Executive Director of United Way Marquette County. And what United Way does in Marquette County is we bring people, organizations, and resources together to help the overall community well-being. And part of that is we have our annual fall campaign and raise money, and then community volunteers come together to distribute that money to the agency programs to better help our community. And then throughout the year, beyond the fundraising, throughout the year, we have collaborative efforts and work on other initiatives with our agencies to just help the community stay strong.
All right, Andrew, thank you for all that good information. So I want to bring this to an end here. Thank you for your time, and I hope that I've filled a little bit of information in there. Maybe you've never heard of a nonprofit, but I can tell you it's a very, very personally rewarding thing to do to help others.